Hello everyone. This is Irene with SaugaTalks. I hope everyone's doing quite well, and I am having fascinating people on my show. Today, I'm so excited to have Helen you with me. Hello, Helen. How are you?
Hi, Erin. I'm doing great. So, hello from Chicago. I'm very excited about talking to you today. Last time we spoke was back in 2019. Well, you were about to start this journey hosting this podcast, and I'm so proud of the success you've had to date.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, because I am chatting with fascinating people and they share their insights on technology, AI, automation, data science, you name it, hot topics, robotics, and all that comes with it, okay? And today I do want to talk to you about the new book you launched, Helen. Congratulations on all the success there.
Thank you. I'm a little bit overwhelmed with the success. So yesterday, the book won first place at New York Book Festival. I have to give kudos to my publisher, Made for Success. So very, very happy about the fact that I selected them.
Amazing, because I'm gonna talk to you about, what does it take to ascend your startup? Because many is trying, right? Many succeeding and many failing. So I do want your gems of wisdom from your own experience, from the entrepreneurs around you. So why don't we start in your book? You talk a lot about disconnects.
Mhm.
Starting that journey with disconnects. Can you please talk to us? What do you mean by disconnects?
Sure. So every human has blind spot, right? So for all the founders, certain time when I talk disconnect, that's really the blind spots that founder or business owners have that prevent them from growing. In the book, I described as you start in a business, there are three phases you go through, right? From turning the idea into product, and then product to market, market to scale. As you go through these three phases, you will have to overcome five growth disconnect. The first one, early stage of your startup, is the product market fit. You have to figure out, right, why you're on this journey, what problem you're trying to solve, who are you solving this problem for, who else is out there solving the same problem, right? And then you have to think through all those. So once you figure that out, the second disconnect is define minimum disconnect. You think about minimum viable product, everyone knows about what that means, right? But then the most critical part is, how do you find the minimum viable team who can deliver what you need to deliver, achieve the goal? And then how do you really create a minimum viable culture to sustain that growth? Most importantly, how do you really drive and define minimum viable repeatability? Once you find repeatability, right, that's how you can start shifting from product to market to scale. This is a time where you run into the third disconnect. That's the voice of customer disconnect. Meaning that, no matter how much you do, you learned, if you don't talk to your customer, you might be off, right? Whatever your go-to-market strategy might be off. You may not be able to scale as fast as you can if you don't listen to your customer, turn that insights built into your product roadmap, built into your service delivery strategy or go-to-market strategy. But then once you overcome all those three, you still need to have well-defined process, right? That's the process disconnect many companies have. And then, but even though you have all the process, you have to hold your leadership team or your team, your company, everybody accountable for what they're supposed to do. That's when the measurement disconnect comes up, right? So that's why these are the five disconnect you have to conquer in order to grow and scale your business. It's much easier to be said and then done, right? But however, being aware of these five disconnect will help you to ask. In the book, I talk about there's no answer to every single question, but there's kind of decision framework. There are 26 questions for you to ask, because I really think that running a business is more like a marathon, it's not a sprint. That's why I put in 26 questions for people to ask around each phase, around 5 different disconnects. So allows you to, allows founders and business owners to ask these questions and help them understand when to ask these questions. Because everyone knows to ask these questions, but when to ask them is really an art, a critical stage as you go through the journey.
Let's start from the beginning, okay? Idea. Which idea worth kind of making into a product? Because we know once person has an idea, it takes years to develop. You mentioned teams, you mentioned product development, you mentioned all the right strategies. It's quite an investment of people's lives. So where do you think idea becomes a product in people's mind first and then in reality?
Yeah, that's a $1 million question, Irene. So it is very challenging in the beginning part of the journey for startup founders, right? But here, something they have to really think about, you really don't know, how do you know the health of your business when you turn idea into product? When would that really become a product is when you can start finding interested people to invest in that solution you created, right? You start really seeing, as you mentioned earlier, start acquiring a customer. That's an indication, wow, you turned something into a product. But the product should really initially should have more of like minimum viable feature. That means that the feature is enough to be marketable, but then you're not going to overspend by creating every single all the bells and whistles into that. That's kind of how you turn that idea into product. But there are 7 basic questions you have to ask, right? What is your, like, the problem you're trying to solve? Earlier I talked about what is your organizational strengths, or as a founder, your strengths. What are the desired business outcome you wanted to apply to the strengths? And what does that mean, right? If you have a team, what does it mean to the rest of the team? How do you find people with complementary skill set to really help you? So turning this idea into product is, you define that as is marketable, is sellable. It turns into a solution that could really make the impact you intend to make. You could be a nonprofit organization. Maybe you don't make profit out of it, but you would make impact. So either way, this turning idea to product is when the time you start seeing measurable impact or measurable outcome. That's when you know that you've turned idea into a product.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Thank you for this, Helen. So I'm very much interested in this very, very early kind of growth, meaning that, yes, you're prototyping, right? You have an idea, you're building your solution, however, minimal viable product, right? And then what is it? You're reaching out to the world, finding that first precious client that will believe in you. Right? In this phase, it's not even about yet monetizing anything. It's about that belief.
It is, absolutely, right? So we all run into our early stage of stating our company. Sometimes you treasure those who make a bet on you. When you're not well known, you really, you are trying to do testing, right? I'm very grateful for Microsoft, for example. I launched my CXO Spice Talk. They're the one that launched with me for my first episode of CXO Spice Talk, right? Ever since I started growing. So you always have the customers who really make the bet on you and invest in you early stage of your company. And that's how do you do that is really your personal brand is really, really important, right? When I say personal brand, is that as early as possible, you can consider how you are going to extend the impact your brand creates and include others in that to articulate that message. Your brand actually came before you started the company, probably even before you even thought of what cool tech, about that cool tech idea, right? Your brand comes from inside of you. And then it is your value, core beliefs, high mission an expression of your why. Sometimes the companies wanted to bet on you, not because of your product, it's because of you, right? Because if you represent their brand, you have aligned value or shared value, they would make the bet on you to really, support you. They want you to be more successful, so they support you. So it's so important to have that brand created early stage of your company, and then you can hire other people.
Your product is gonna pivot. Okay, it's unavoidable, don't you think? The first idea, what you think you bring into market, it will change. It will not stay, right? The initial thought.
Absolutely. You think about Amazon, right? They start off as a bookstore. Where are they now? Right? People don't talk about them as a bookstore anymore. Of course, they do publishing online, but they have Whole Foods, they have everything, right? So that's companies evolve, and the technology evolved, and then the impact they make also evolves. So you have to not only we talk about being prepared for the journey, you have to always adapt, right, to the market change, to the consumer, to the customer demand change. All those things are important to remember. No matter how well prepared you are, you always run into unexpected. And that's where you adapt your strategy to the day-to-day execution, further addressed and aligned, then so that you can acclimate to the voice of your customer and then further scale your business.
Absolutely. You know what? I am in huge admiration for tenacity of entrepreneurs, who are able to quit their day jobs, who are able to turn their, life upside down just for this mission. Okay, it's definitely worth all the applause. Let's talk about some interesting elements when people looking for investments, for funds, without even proving to the market, to themselves, that the idea worth anything. So where do you see this kind of hunger games, coming in for new funding, getting funded, and then what? Because, this kind of attitude hurts companies, hurts reputations, don't you think?
Yeah, I would say that entrepreneurship is not for everyone. As you're married to one, the kind of the drill they have to go through, right? They bootstrap. There are days that they have limited resources. There are days that there's no progress. There are days that they're about to run out of funds. There are all those hard works, but then the entrepreneurs are the ones, I worked with, at least they thrive on strong sense of personal self-efficacy to execute their vision. They have a very keen eye for innovation to identify new products or new markets. They are also great listeners, right? It's not just about listen to what people have to say. They listen to figure out how to turn what they heard into actionable insights. And then they also articulate that vision super well. And then they inspire devotions in others, right? Their risk tolerance level is much higher. Their motivation for achievement is much stronger. So overall, those are kind of the characteristics I've seen. But even you have all those characteristics, it does not guarantee a success for running a company or scaling a startup. This is why you got to hire people who have complementary skill set to help you achieve the goal. When I climbed the Mount Everest base camp, I did not know how it was like. So I hired a Sherpa, right, to come along with me, to guide me throughout the journey. That's how you can really be successful to achieve the goal. If I were there alone, I don't think that, first of all, it was not the best approach to do so. Secondly, I probably would have failed like many other people who were on that trip. That 200 people, out of 200 people, only 3 people made it that day. So that tells you the ratio, right? Like startup, 90% of startup failed. There's a reason for them, because they don't have experienced people are surrounded by experienced people, or they're not aware of the disconnects that around them. So those are the challenge that they could run into.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Great points again, Helen. So to me, again, there is this kind of dilemma between a very practical approach, right, of thinking
Mhm.
about your company, of strategizing, making right priorities. At the same time, if you're not a dreamer, a big time,
Yeah.
right, nothing is going to happen. So where do you think this balance? Because go to market is very practical step. You have to put all the right channels together, right? All the
Mhm.
right strategies, and they have to work. Otherwise, again, right, you're always on this on high risk of disappearing. So where do you think this beautiful dreamer kind of mindset works in in balance with their practical pragmatic approaches?
Yeah, I have to say that having worked with many entrepreneurs, I realized that there's no such thing called being balanced. Despite
Mhm.
of the in spite of the desire to balance, because it's really depends on what part of journey you're on. Right, in that journey, there are days you're like pulling out hairs. You pulling out hair. There are days you like working 16 hours a day. You don't see any uh, outcome. But then there are also days like customer really you start really making gaining traction that you celebrate, right? You celebrate those milestones, small milestones with your team. So I think really to turn something, I would always say start focus on something small each time you build a small milestone, right? Like for example, I worked with this AI company years ago. This is about 4 years ago, where they were at a time only had two customers, right? They're trying to, their ARR was 175K. They're trying to really build this voice activated AI solution. And then they only going after the financial service vertical. So I gather the team in the room. There are, multiple co-founders were in the room. We started with the branding strategy, right? I asked each of them, can you give me 3 words to describe what this company is about? So none of them could come up with 3 words, right? They give me 3 paragraphs, a whiteboard. We later on, we spent the entire week finally came up with 3 words, right? So that we realized, because they initially started this to ask financial questions, right? To say, hey, they asked this app, AI app, to say, can you tell me how much I spent during my trip in California in the past months? So then they pull in all the data information to tell you how much you spend, and then they can tell you how much money you have left to spend. So it was really quite interesting, but I challenged them. I said, what if people who can afford traveling, what if people don't have credit card? What are you going to do? They just pay cash. This app cannot track. Is that really a problem you're trying to solve? So then we finally realized that this solution does not only apply to people with bank account. You can do the drive-through. If you go to McDonald's drive-through, you can order using the app to order, place your order. If you're in car driving, you can leverage the same solution to leverage this voice activated assistant to ask, hey, do I have enough gasoline to drive here from my next destination? Where's the next gas station? So we were able to expand them from one vertical to 3, expand them from 2 customers to 36 within a year. So they grew the ARR from 170K to 4.5 million in the year, right? Just by going through that exercise, asking the question, for them to realize what is the solution is really about, what is the problem we're trying to solve. We have all the capabilities, but what exactly our ICP or ideal customer profile should be? How do we expand our thinking to really make it really target different types of profile customers, or broader have a broader use case, right, for our solution? So that's very simple, sounds very simple, but it takes time, because they're all brilliant founders, right? They understand technology inside and out, but they don't necessarily understand what questions to ask, what point to ask these questions, and how to accelerate the growth, extending their market share.
Look, you're talking about voice of the customer.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a fascinating topic when they think about, again, very first customer, like very few important customers, how much you have to bend, because sometimes, right? You won't provide discount. You want to work for free. You just want this reputation, right? This branding to grow. So again, where is this balance between listening to the customer and just completely pivoting, under the pressure the customer demands?
Yeah, that's such an excellent question, Irene. Listening to your customer does not mean you will do everything at a cost in order to meet one customer's demand, right? So I find that's kind of typical founder syndrome. Sometimes founders just do whatever they're asked to do. They forgot about what their core solution is. Like if you keep doing the band-aid approach to tailor your product to one customer needs, forgot about it may not apply to the rest of the target customers. You're going to run into situations sooner or later, right? The right approach is if you are asked to do for something by one customer, your first question is this functionality going to be needed by other customers? Can this be marketable further down the road? If the answer is yes, you should invest. Otherwise, you should be very honest with your customer to say, look, I understand you would like to have this feature. This is not our part of our roadmap, and then probably not in the near term. So you should ask them to say, why do you need this? Sometimes you'd be surprised to hear through this dialogue, they may not need this feature. They may just want to solve a simple problem that can be solved through process improvements, through something else, not necessarily change the product feature to tailor to their need. So my advice is just really be honest with your customer, be honest with you, asking the powerful questions before you just jump through the hoop to tailor your product to a one-off request by the customer, because that's not how you scale, right? If you keep bundling your product, and then you're going to delay your overall product roadmap development, and then you're going to burden your entire team in the longer term to grow and scale because at the expense of one customer. That's not the right way to scale. The right way to scale is to really understand deeper about why the customer asking that. Maybe they can do it other way, and if that's also going to be needed by other customers, with that feature or ask going to be marketable down the road for you, right? So just have a longer term view. That's how you balance the longer term view with the short term needs, customer needs.
Yep, because you mentioned the cost of customization sometimes critical. It can bring your whole business down, right? If you start customizing, like you mentioned, for particular feature, that's not going to be marketable outside of this customer, right? Exactly. Absolutely. So with that, let's look inside of startups, because everyone starts with goodwill, right? Everyone excited, rah, we're going to change this world forever, right? So in your experience, Helen, how fast owners or partners, co-partners would need to think about, am I doing everything for people who work for me? Mm-hmm. Am I being a good place to work in? Because we know how many countless hours it takes, right, to bring anything to the market.
That's such an important question, Irene. I'm glad you're asking that, right? So to me, as early as possible, right? I talk about the minimum viable culture because we tend to think about minimum viable product, but very rarely we talk about minimum viable culture, right? In my book, I talk about cultural collaboration. What that really means is taking intentional action to build an inclusive, thriving culture where it's safe to share ideas, right? You want people to be open to share. It begins with a thoughtful commitment to culture first and foremost as a way to bring everyone together, bring the team together. I mean, I talk about, the minimum viable culture where you don't try to boil the ocean all in one day, but rather you need to sit down, right, in a simple set of shared beliefs for stakeholders to really learn on, in order to create this remarkable outcomes, right? For example, the core belief, what is your company's core belief? You think about Apple, think differently, right? That's their tagline. You think about Nike, just do it. You think about Disney, it's making people happy. You can associate, right? When you go Disney, bring the family over, you can see that smiley face and happy faces. So that's how you create your brand, but that for you, your core belief, what is that, right? So that's so important. I actually mentioned in my book, mentioned about V2 Mom, that's invented by Salesforce. The V is that V2 means two V's, vision and your value, so important. And then the M is the measurement, and then the mission and how the obstacle, what is the obstacle for you to achieve the mission. And then the last M is measurement, how you measure. So if for any company, if you map it out at the very top level and then trickle down to each of the function, allow each of the functional leader to understand how each of them can contribute. So everybody will have their OKR, right, objective each quarter, and then they align their execution, day-to-day execution to that toward the same goal. And then that's really where you're going to start seeing the results, seeing the focus and result, right? This company culture drives sustainable growth. Central to that is employee experience, right, which really leads to much better customer experience. This matters not just some of the time, it matters all the time. So aligning that, meaning that this means you need to clarify the roles and responsibilities, setting up expectations, holding people accountable, and rewarding the top performers and weeding out the toxic employees. That's so critical.
I encourage everyone to go to Amazon, to go to places where Helen is publishing and get the book, and in a way that it is a very practical and pragmatic guide. So Helen, thank you so much. I just want to leave the audience with few takeaways, if you don't mind, because we did speak about so many elements of getting idea to product, of growing and succeeding. So what do you want to leave our audience with?
Sure. Thank you, Irene. It's such a pleasure chatting with you. But remember a few things. Number one, only 20% of your success is attributed to your technology. 80% of is overcoming the change management necessary to operationalize your vision, right? Because growth really thrives at the intersection of humanity and technology. That's why culture collaboration is so imperative, right? You got to build a inclusive culture. You have to make sure you select the right investor, hiring the right people with the right empathy to grow and scale your business. But remember, summiting the mountain is not the end goal. The end goal is to you really coming down the mountain with your entire team and celebrating the accomplishment. That's what you want the end to be, right? So I would say that for all the founders, just to keep focusing on what's within your control. That's the attitude, the efforts, and mindset. Once you do that, you're going to start seeing a lot more success on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen, so very much. It's such a pleasure talking to you. So we're gonna make sure, right, the audiences out there on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on YouTube, that they get to hear this talk. And I do hope it will inspire entrepreneurs and it will help them to get grounded in their dreams to achieve.
Thank you so much, Irene. Such a pleasure speaking to you. If any people want to get hold of me, they can always find me on my website, taigongadvisory.com, or they can find me through Twitter. My handler is Helen Yu.